extending school closures after Christmas. Now, People Before Profit TD Brid Smith has called on the Education Minister Norma Foley to keep schools closed for a longer period after the Christmas break. This has been recommended by a recent ECDC report, that's the European Centre for Disease Control, who suggested that such a measure may help reduce the spread of the virus. Well, Brid Smith joins us now on the line, and thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Brid, why are you making this call?
Recently I have been working with a group called the Forgotten Families, and I read a report that was reviewed by Dr. Anthony Staines, which they had published, and it makes some very important observations about the levels of infections in schools and the possible spread of the virus in schools. And it looks like the role of schools in the spread of the virus may be much more complex than we previously thought. And then the ECDC recently called for a longer closure of schools over the Christmas period in order to suppress the virus. Now, when you combine that fact with the reopening of the economy over the Christmas period, I believe it would be much safer for us to keep the schools closed for a bit longer in order to help keep the R levels down. And I think we need to look at the latest figures around schools and reported cases. So, for example, up to the 20th of November, which is about 3 weeks ago now, there were 4,300 reported cases in the age group of 5 to 15, 86% from September. So we have to really look at how we're collecting this data and what it means, and look at it again, because it is more complex. And there has been, I think it's 31 children in the age group of 5 years to 14 years have been hospitalised with COVID since September, and that's 62% of all hospitalisations in that age group for this year. So it's quite a serious situation that we have to look at. And then you've got the vulnerable families who are very worried about their own situation.
And I'll get back to that in a second, but just in terms of the wider issue, NPHET has consistently said that schools are not high risk for transmission, and I know you're quoting figures at me. I might quote some figures back at you. I don't want to bamboozle the listener, but there were 38 cases of COVID-19 detected in schools the week before last, I believe. That was after mass testing of 2,178 pupils, and they found 38 cases.
Well, I'm going on the reports from PQs that I've asked, and I think that level is quite high since the schools reopened in September. And I think that we have been saying the schools are safe, but in Ireland in particular, we need to reconsider this, because we have more crowded classrooms and we have poor ventilation in 80% of our schools. And that's going to be a huge issue coming into the cold winter months, already cold in winter. And it's really not tenable to just keep saying that the schools are safe and not really examine it. But I think the ECDC report, the European Centre for Disease Control, is an important one. And they are recommending to everybody that they keep the schools closed for a bit longer to help suppress the virus following the Christmas period. To me, that makes sense.
What about the workers, Brid? What about the workers if they had to have their children home from school and look after their children while they're working? It puts huge pressure on them, doesn't it?
Oh, there's no doubt about that. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And I think the government would have to step up to the plate and allow for the wage subsidies and all of the other financial
the actual
that they
people they
in.
work for and the companies they work for? Are you saying that they should allow companies stop productivity, stop producing stuff, and let the state cough up? Is that it?
Well, I think, Cormac, I'm suggesting that this is a sort of a short-term measure. That Brid Smith is not making the recommendation. I'm not the scientist. I'm a politician, but I am being advised by what the European Centre for Disease Control are saying.
And maybe in fairness, they're looking at France and Belgium and countries that are far worse off than we are here in terms of COVID-19 transmission.
But they are also giving us the evidence that in the case of the virus spreading, and I think that we're risking the virus spreading over the Christmas period, I think everybody is acknowledging that the best thing to do is to keep the schools closed for a little bit longer.
How much is a little bit longer in your view? A week, 2 weeks?
I would say a week on top of the closures that are already there would be good, because that gives you probably nearly 3 weeks in total, probably 4 weeks in total, when the schools will be shut, because they can't say whether it is, just transmitted between children, but the activity of coming and going to school. And also we have a low level of ventilation. I'll just repeat that. 80% of our schools are not properly ventilated, and we have a higher class number than most of Europe.
And would you expect the schools to work for a week longer, make up those days sometime else in the term after Christmas?
Well, I haven't thought about that, but that's a possibility. But the point is that this is about controlling the virus, not about trying to steal education from our children, not at all. And in fact, that week could be dedicated to some form of online education where we up and running properly with that. But as I said at the outset, there is a cohort of parents out there who are totally forgotten, families who are trying to keep their children at home, or children who want to stay at home. Because I have a woman in Ballyfermot, for example, who has chronic heart disease, and her children are being told they must go to school. And they're terrified of bringing danger home to their mother.
Brid, we've got a huge reaction to what you have to say. We'll get to some of that after 5 o'clock, but thank you very much for joining us this evening. That's People Before Profit TD Brid.